Hello everyone, welcome to another video. This week we have for you a video that will be very useful for those who are interested in learning about text types and text structures. So as you can imagine, in this video we will teach you how to analyze a text based on two different perspectives. Firstly, according to their type, and finally according to their text structure.
The fourth type of text. Text types is a way to name the different functions of text and their characteristics. In other words, why the text is written for. Consequently, we will find four major categories of text. Those categories are expository, narrative, descriptive, and persuasive.
Firstly, we have the expository text. This type of text is usually used to inform or to explain a process. It is logical and follow a determinate structure. Well, as you can see, here we have a recipe. If you look at the structure, this text is divided into two parts. We have the ingredients and we have the cooking directions. Just like I mentioned before, in this type of text, the main purpose is to explain a process, that in this case is the preparation of lasagna.
The narrative text type is used to tell a story. The features of this text type are, for example, it has characters, dialogues, and also follows a logical pattern. In this case, it has a beginning, then you could find intervals, a problem, then a climax, and later on, obviously, a happy end. Some examples of this kind of text are short stories, novels, and fairy tales. For example, another example that I could give you is in the story of the Little Red Riding Hood, when we can appreciate clearly the beginning of each of these components of the structure of this kind of text. Always this story start with once upon a time. Later, the intervals, for example, where she asked to her mother to visit her grandmother. The problem arrives when the little girl has an encounter with the wolf, and this wolf eats her grandmother. The climax of this history when the little red hood arrives into the grandmother's house, and the final when the woodsman kills the wolf and saves the grandmother and also to this little girl. The descriptive type of text is used primarily to describe an image or to make the reader imagine what the author is expressing. Besides, it is used for describe people, events, places, and nature. This text can also be poetic and with a large amount of adjectives in order to reach their goal of description. Here you can see an example. This poem is very poetic and contains a lot of adjectives in order to describe the perfect woman for the author. Finally, the persuasive type of text that is used to persuade the reader or to convince him or her that the author idea is the correct one. In this type of text, the author provides a lot of arguments and ideas. An example of this kind of text are advertisement, opinions, criticism, reviews, and letters. Here I will show you an example taken from Rotten Tomatoes, and in this text we can see that the main purpose is to persuade the reader.
The recurrence rule. The recurrence rule is the recurrence and the reappearance of elements during the development of a text. In other words, in each new sentences, take an element of the previous one. This is called maintenance of the reference. There exists a lot of mechanisms to recurrence in the text. However, we will mention two of them.
A lexeme corresponds to a set of forms taken by a single root word. For example, in English, run, runs, and run, and running are forms of the same lexeme, which can be represented as run.
Lexical substitution. In this rule of recurrence, we can substitute a lexeme for another. We will mention two cases. Substitution in the same level. In this case, the lexeme is adjustment by another one, which does not alter the main motif. Let's take a look at the following example. These extracts are part from an informative text retrieved from the BBC. As you can see, we don't lose our main lexeme. Consequently, we still notice who or whom is the text talking about. Substitution in a different level. In contrast to the previous case, the lexeme is adjustment by another one that could temper the main topic of the text. Let's see an example to understand better. The lexeme which appears in the first clause is robots. However, in the following clause, this lexeme is changed by the word machines. In this example, the text goes for the more specific term to another more general. In other words, the lexeme machines is not coming from the lexeme's robots. Ellipsis. In this type of occurrence, we reiterate the main element without mention formally in the text. The grammatical rules in Spanish allow to use this rule. Nonetheless, this rule is also possible in English. Let's see an example. The following extract is taken from the narrative text The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. As we can see, in the last sentence, the author is omitting the subject, and something interesting is that he is also omitting the auxiliary verb. As a conclusion, the main idea of the sentence never disappears even though the subject is not formally present.
The progression rule. In order to understand what progression in a text is, it is necessary to consider that in a well-formed text, every new sentence must somehow talk about the same, and this is what we call recurrence. But in turn, every one of them must say something new, and this is what we call progression. Progression refers to the introduction of a new referent or the introduction of new information about the referents that have been already mentioned. In the pre-school terminology, the concepts of theme and rhyme are used to design, respectively, what is already known and the new information. This will help us understand the progression with a continuous theme, one of the three basic types of thematic progression. Just like the name of this type of thematic progression indicates, in the progression with a continuous theme, the text keeps the same theme and each rhyme provides new information in the form of new predicates. In this example, the referent is Mr. Sibley. This entire extract is talking you about Mr. Sibley. So, as we can see in this type of thematic structure, all the information or the predictions refers to the same individual that can reappear each time with a different designation.